emphasizing a point and you're still showing grace to somebody while trying to emphasize that point. Yeah, I mean, not that it's open season, but if you want to emphasize a point to somebody and still show grace to them, there could be a moment in time where that's what's going to get through to somebody.
Yeah. So if you're on the record, Gabe cusses all the time.
Gabe cusses all
I've known Gabe since he was like 12, and I don't think I've ever
not one cuss word.
I don't even think a G golly has ever come out of his mouth.
Golly, G.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that. I rock
what do
with
you
you
mean
on that.
you're with him on that? Like cussing is okay.
We might get divided right here.
I know. I'm asking a question.
This is a free-for-all podcast.
Are we recording right now, Verlon? Yeah. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to Beyond the Letter. What a day. Today we have Chelsie at the table with us.
Y'all?
We got a couple special things. We got Gabe sent with us. So Gabe is normally the one who's switching. We got young Andy on the ones and twos switching today. So we got Gabe today.
What's up, Andy?
Who happens to be like, a lot of people don't know this, but Gabe is like a Bible school guru.
I went there.
He went to it.
Which school? Which school did you go to?
I had to follow in the footsteps.
Oh, you went to
the
Masters.
rabbis. Yeah. He went through the rabbi's footsteps.
I'm nervous now.
But he did a lot better than I did.
I wasn't as well known as he was over there.
Well, I wasn't. What's a negative thing? Like when you're well known.
Infamous.
Infamous. Yeah. I was infamous.
Yeah, he was.
You were just.
I was just a passerby. I was just.
It's a horrible thing.
It was bad. It was bad. I couldn't even fully associate.
I don't think I would have made it at Masters, bro. There's just no way I would have made it through.
Probably not. Well, you would have been with me more than likely.
Yeah.
I would have been infamous by
I
association.
burnt that place down, dude.
Yeah.
I burned a lot of places down, unfortunately.
Women have to wear you have to have your whole body covered.
You have to have your
head covering.
Wait, do they accept women for seminary?
Yeah.
The seminary?
No. Oh gosh,
no, right?
No.
How about
that's
undergrad?
That's why I went to Biola, not Mass.
Yeah, I went to Biola too.
You did?
I did.
Oh, we got a little.
Oh, baby, here we go.
Masters versus Biola in the house.
We're better.
All 4 years.
I did 3 years.
You did 3 years.
Yeah,
Okay,
I did 3 years.
Transfer.
I
Transfer
transferred.
student.
Yeah,
I transferred 3 years too,
What?
baby. Come on,
I gave
man.
her a word from the Lord to go to Biola,
He
and
sure
she didn't
did.
listen to it.
Okay.
That's accurate.
She did not
accurate.
listen to her youth pastor.
Yes.
Shout out to Biola and I went to Talbot too. So
Did you
really?
really?
they
Did you
took-
MDiv?
I got my MDiv there.
No way.
It's all my money,
So
bro.
they
You're a
asked me to do
Talbot MDiv guy.
They called me in to do MDiv at Talbot because they said we need more Black female representatives in the program.
Yeah,
and
there's-
so,
And I wish I was a black female. Maybe nowadays I could identify as one. But
you probably can.
Chelsea got the
so much
special
opportunity for these schools that are
I didn't do it.
diversity,
No, I didn't
equity,
do it.
inclusion, man.
they don't need more of us there because there's so many Asian guys there. There's like 50,
Yeah, no, there
50%
is.
of like Talbot Seminary are like
Is Asian.
Really?
Asian men. Yeah, specifically Korean American men.
It's
so.
a smart. I mean, it's a
Why
smart
they
protocol
ask?
to go to. You know, you got to really highly cherish higher education to do that.
Yeah, bro. I went to undergrad for a Bible degree.
This is news to me. I
And
didn't know you
MDiv.
did your MDiv.
Wow.
Oh yeah, bro. I was in a
This is a
doctorate
real
program
deal,
at
baby.
DTS too.
Wow.
What?
And then I dropped
Dallas?
out.
What?
Dallas Theological
You're a doctoral
Seminary.
dropout.
I dropped out in 2020.
Wow.
I was
pretty
like,
rare.
I just was like, I don't need this, bro.
It's pretty rare to get to a doctoral dropout. Dude. I'm a bachelor's dropout.
You didn't even want to pretend to go that far.
My wife has a PhD at UCLA.
Really?
So she was getting her PhD.
What?
Yeah, she's smart,
Your
bro.
wife's a doctor?
She's the real doctor.
Like a
You're the dropout doctor.
Like, she has a
Medical.
PhD in education
Oh,
at
yes.
UCLA. Her dissertation
Ed.
was nominated Dissertation of the Year. I mean, she's. So I felt insecure.
We
So
need to
I was
bring
like-
her on the
I was like, yo, I got to.
pod.
I'm looking for new board members at my university.
Okay.
So, you
Okay.
know, I need some more educated people.
Yeah,
so
she ain't black girl, but she's an
Hey,
Asian girl. They
Asian.
do
Yeah,
need
no,
more
no.
Asian girls everywhere. You know,
at
so.
Life, we're not, you know. At Life Pacific University, we're not concerned with that. Yeah.
Chelsea, so you got a special call to go there, and then you still rejected it.
Yeah, I met
That's
with like
crazy.
3 people in the department, and they were like really trying to get me. They're like, we really believe that you'd be great for this program to be. I said, what do you really need? We really need Black female representatives in the room.
Were they going to
And
pay for it?
They weren't gonna. They're gonna pay 40% of it. So I was like,
How much?
40% of it.
Fuller offered to pay for my MDiv.
Oh, see, yeah.
I was like, I thought about it. I still might one day.
Yeah,
Things slow
so I
down.
know.
Now that I think about it, I can't recall one sister.
Exactly.
Not even one when I was there.
Oh,
there,
God,
there
no.
may have
And
been.
then they said, I forgot who
There's
it was.
way more. There's got to be way more people of color going to Fuller than there is.
Yeah.
Oh, there is.
Yeah,
And then he
yeah,
said,
yeah.
and then he's like, sat me down. It was a man and a female, and he's like, and just to let you know, it's going to be an uphill battle when you get into Talbot. Like an uphill battle. People are not going to think that you're going to be in the room, but we think you can handle it. So it was a whole thing. But the reason I
Yeah, I'm
said no
glad
is
you said
because
no.
they weren't going to pay for it.
Can't stand those Biola people.
Hey, he's talking about you. Adam has like mixed emotions because you went to Biola, but you said no to the seminary. But you're still on staff.
You're still on staff.
You
Praise
made the
God.
cut.
Yeah.
Here we
Yo,
go.
that's crazy. All right.
Yeah.
Suffice to say, Gabe from Masters.
Welcome.
Yes, I'm
but
here
Gabe
from Masters.
studied, he's full on biblical languages major. So
Oh,
the
like
dude
Greek
went
and
all
Hebrew.
in on
Yeah,
Greek and
yeah.
Hebrew. So dude can
Yeah,
read a Greek
yeah.
Bible, read a Hebrew Bible,
Well,
you know.
I took 9 semesters of Greek.
Yeah, that's more than
Nice.
I
And I
took.
still
You
don't
forgot
know
it all?
Greek.
That's more than I took.
I'm not even
Dude, them
playing.
vocab, them flashcards are hard, dude.
Because it's mandatory undergrad for me to do 4.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And then seminary 5.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So that's
right,
9 semesters of Greek, fam.
Yeah. I thought about doing my THM just because I don't want to redo the languages. I forgot it all. So if you do your THM, you don't have to do languages. That's the one you don't have to do. But in the collegiate sphere of ministry, THM is not looked at as highly regarded as the MDiv. So
That's so weird too. I don't. That's yeah.
I'm
That's
even
so-
when I was,
that's so
because I was a
wild.
theology major. What was your major at Biola?
It was biblical studies.
So just generic.
Yeah, it's just called biblical study. There's
Right.
there's like a leadership
general.
track, ministry track, and there's like a biblical studies track.
Oh, see, Masters had like 11 tracks within their biblical division.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Biblical studies is like the most general you
General,
could be,
yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you get an emphasis from there. So I started as biblical studies, theology, and then I changed to biblical languages,
Why?
which is under biblical
Theology
studies.
was too hard.
Theology, well, it's the program changed so much from
me,
when
yeah.
you went there, because when I was there, it was like 3 guys that were theology. It wasn't even a combo theology / apologetics anymore.
Right.
It was just you would take some apologetic classes, but it wasn't
Yeah.
like a whole thing. But I started as theology.
They
and
couldn't get guys interested in it. That was the problem.
Yeah, they couldn't
because theology majors are operate way too in the gray area, and places like Biola Masters, they hardline black and white so hard that most guys who are going to Masters don't like that gray area. Like when we're theology majors, we study demonology. Like Reformed guys who go to Biola or Masters are not wanting to study demonology.
Sure.
You know, like they
I
want to
want to study demonology.
Yeah. Well, just
This
turn your lights out in your bedroom tonight and watch Exorcist, and you'll study it really fast.
This episode is sponsored by Masters Seminary. Just for
No,
y'all.
no, no,
That's
no,
what we're
no,
talking
no.
about.
That's not on board.
Just
That's not on board.
kidding.
Life Pacific University is sponsored by Life
That's right,
Pacific
like with
University.
LPU. There we go.
Pentecostal Charismatic.
There we go. There we go.
By the way, well, I haven't even got. Then we have Will Chung here in the house as
up,
well.
what's up?
On Young Chingu.
What's up, my brother?
What's up?
What's up, my G?
See, y'all don't even know. I
don't
studied,
even know,
I studied
man.
tongues at Life Pacific University.
You are so annoying sometimes.
I majored in
He's ready for
tongues.
trouble today, man. All the comments right now. We're going to have to edit some of these things out, fam.
100%.
We got Will in the house. Will was with us early on in the pod.
I don't remember.
And
how long.
I don't know. Yeah,
Couple months
5
ago.
months ago, maybe.
Already?
Yeah,
It's had to be. What
Pretty
episode was
long
it,
ago.
Nancy? Do you know what number? She'll get it.
months ago?
What number?
Pretty
It's
far.
gotta be.
Pretty
been a
far. I
minute.
We
think
just
so.
hit. This is our 52nd or 53rd episode right now.
Wow.
So we've hit a
What
year. Yeah. So you guys were like in like I want to say like the 20s or
Dude,
20s, maybe 30s, but that'd been 20 weeks ago or whatever. So
Crazy.
it was a while ago. You and
good to
Sammy
be
were
back,
here.
bro.
So
It's good to
Will's
be back.
back. Dude just, popped off. He comes on the podcast once and like 3 of his
Yeah.
posts go viral. What was it, Nance?
7 million for his
Oh, 7 million from your post that posted from Beyond the Letter. Dang,
crazy,
dude.
right?
Kyrie Irving reposted you.
did repost
Urkel reposted
I
you.
know, bro.
Urkel, really?
Episode 38.
I don't
yeah,
even know Steve
Urkel.
Urkel's real name, but Urkel.
Yeah, I forget his name, but he reposted
I
it.
didn't know that.
Wow. So that was how many long?
3 months ago.
3 months ago.
3 months. Okay.
I mean, that's still 90 days. That's far.
Yeah, 5 months, but yeah, that's crazy.
Not
man.
that far. It all blurs together right now for me.
Dude.
So
That was a crazy post, dude. So many of my friends were like screenshotting me, like, yo, so and so posted it, so and so posted it, this group posted it, and I was like, yo, it's wild.
now that's got to be great. As a lot of people may not know, like you're a church planner, so you just celebrated 2 years. That you kind of just risked it all, planted a church in Orange County, and so no one wrote you a huge, massive check and just said, "Hey, go do this." Will, it was like you're like, me and my family, we're gonna go gritty, we're gonna streamline, like live minimal as possible, and we're gonna pastor a community. And so that's got to be unique, that because that's not. I don't think that's too often that then someone who's church planning begins to make and you were off social media for like years, right?
Almost 3 years.
3 years. You had like no Instagram at all.
No, completely shut it off.
Yeah.
Like deleted it. So I had to create like a new account and stuff. So I couldn't even react.
So I think we were like probably like your 6th post on your entire Instagram or something like that.
Probably. Yeah, I had just opened it like half a year. I mean, I get the timeline all messed up now.
Yeah.
Less than a year ago, I reopened it.
Why did you shut it down?
I just needed God.
I get it. Simple.
I just needed to go into the
Next
cave
question.
like Elijah did, bro. I just needed to fix my Wi-Fi and get back with God. And I didn't think I was gonna come back actually. Yeah, even when I met you, I didn't have social media, so we couldn't even connect online. I deleted
Luckily, we
it.
liked each other when we met.
Oh yeah, bro.
So then we exchanged numbers.
That's right, bro.
Because if you don't
Social
really
media
like
handles.
someone, then you
Here's
exchange
my
Instagrams.
Snapchat, not even my Instagram.
Here's my Zanga. Here's my MySpace
Yeah,
account, dog.
exactly.
But
I check it once a year.
Yeah, bro. I just unplugged and didn't think I was gonna come back at all. And then I remember, like, so we planted a church a year in without me even having social media.
Yeah.
And so I remember about a year in, I just felt like God was like, come out the cave, don't be scared. Like, you needed time to heal and rest, but like, get out there again.
Yeah.
It's okay to get shot again, you know.
Yeah, that's what it is.
And then my first post goes 7 million views.
Right?
Good, bad, ugly. Like, dude, people say some
People were
crazy
going crazy.
stuff.
Yo, tell this Chinese communist to go back to China. Dude, tell this pastor.
People
oh
are pretty
my.
wild.
Yeah, dude.
After like
And then other people thought you were like you're in like the group BTS, you know. A bunch of girls want to know if you were single.
oh man, my wife sent me a post that says this guy is hot AF, and she like circled it. She's like, at least they know what's up.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Hey, at least she agreed with it. You
Yeah,
know,
bro, I'm
at least
with it,
wifey
dude.
agreed with it.
I'm
you know?
with it, dude.
All right, here's what I thought about doing. There's a post Chelsie sent us earlier in our group Slack earlier this week, and so unfortunately we've all seen it, Will, except for you probably.
Let's just go.
Which
Let's
I
rock
thought
with
would
it.
be good. So this guy is a famous, I think he's a country singer, right? Jelly Roll is.
I actually don't know.
He is, yeah. He's a famous
trust you
country
more than I
singer
trust
named
him.
Jelly Roll. And he was on, what's that comedian's name who has a podcast? Andrew, the famous
Schultz.
Andrew Schultz.
Schultz, yeah.
Flagrant, Brilliant
Yes,
Idiots.
so he
one
was,
of those two.
I think Flagrant.
This
yeah.
guy's in
so,
the
so this guy
in the community.
Will came,
Oh, bro,
Will came ready, bro.
I watch
So-
Flagrant all the time,
Okay.
by the way.
So Jelly Roll was on, I think, Flagrant's podcast, and he makes a long statement about Christians in the church. But here's what I thought we would do that would be different and unique from Beyond the Letter, because normally it's just open forum. Hey, what's your opinion? What's your side? What I thought is, so for those listening, here's what we're gonna do on purpose, and I think it would. I think it'll create like, because here's what you had normally.
He wants us to fight. That's what he's trying to say without saying it.
That's
Actually,
what those
I don't
masters
think we're
people
trying to
do.
I know.
Those masters people on that side of the table.
Masters. Thank you, masters.
So, yeah, okay. I'll put both options on the table, and you guys can choose. All right. So either. Here's option one, which is the one I came in with, which wouldn't mean we would all necessarily argue. We would start on one topic first. So either we're gonna play his post, and then for a moment we all have to play Angel's Advocate. So we all have to agree with him and explore which would be more uncomfortable with us because we all go to church. We believe in kind of traditional framework of Christianity, which is go to church, involve your community, read your Bible, some stuff he shares is kind of opposite of that. So there are some areas we believe in having a pastor and all these things like that. So it'd make us all feel uncomfortable being total angel advocate to him. But we're going to have to do that. Yeah. So that's the game. Like we all have to, because this is what's different on the podcast. Because sometimes everyone can, some people can go quiet. While only the one who disagrees talks,
Sure.
But it forces all of us to angel advocate and say, hey, this is why he's right? And then we spend a time then totally devil's advocate and then break down everything that he says and maybe why we don't agree with it, okay? And we're all collectively doing that at the same time, okay? Or we do what we said, or option B, we split the table. We split the table.
We'll lay him out.
By all of us masters.
No doubt about it.
And then
I'm the most anointed because I have the master's degree.
Yeah, exactly.
And a fake doctorate.
Yeah, you're a doctorate dropout, bro. That's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. I've never heard someone that had so much aspiration so high and then dropped out.
I stayed in for 2 years, dog. 2 years.
That's a long time.
I did, bro. 2020.
Why'd you drop
finish.
out? Okay.
Go finish.
Yeah. How long was your program going to be? Like,
I was at the point where I had to write my dissertation.
Yeah.
How long
Are you
did
serious?
Yeah.
We'll get back to that later.
All right, we'll get back to that.
His thesis was why African American women don't go to Talbot Seminary.
Talbot.
Talbot.
Trying to sound like he speaks Aramaic.
Talbot.
All right, so option 1, angel's advocate, devil's advocate. We all do it at the same time. Option 2, we split the table. One side gets assigned angel advocate, one side gets devil's advocate. I'll let you guys decide which route we go, what option we going with.
You decide. Well,
the most anointed decides.
Yeah.
That's what we'll do.
The smartest.
I could do both. Let's do number 2 then.
Okay.
We're gonna be against. We're gonna be against it.
Okay.
You guys will be devil's advocate.
We'll be devil's
We'll
advocate.
be angel's advocate.
Okay.
It's too easy.
Straight up. Let's go.
I'm just playing. No. It's actually, I would feel more comfortable devil's advocate for sure.
Oh,
So
yeah, usually
we'll
that's
take angel
easier, I
advocate
feel
then.
like.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna agree with Jelly Roll.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go.
So for those that are catching on, so we're gonna play a clip by one of the world's most famous, country singer.
They're labeling him as an American rapper, but
Is he?
everything that pops up is him on the CMTs. So
Yeah,
it's
I
giving,
think he's-
and he's from Nashville, so it's giving.
It's
confused.
like their version of rap is what he
That's
does.
it.
Yeah, that's
That's
Yeah,
that
okay.
master's
Okay.
mind of yours. Love that.
You ready, boy?
All right.
Dissecting
All right.
the video.
And then anyone else in the room can expunge anyone, like try to trap any one of us if we didn't say anything correctly. Like you could jump in and just be like, well, what about blank? Okay. So you guys, anyone in the room could play
came
either
to
or. You could
fight
jump in
today.
and, okay, so that's the roll. We're going to play Jelly Roll's clip.
Okay.
The Red Bull.
And
Okay, it's the Red Bull, yeah.
and I've already had 2 espresso shots today.
Oh, that's what it
He
is.
is ready to go. Ready to
I forgot I had to
ascend
take
right
my
now.
kids to school, so I was up super early. All right, so let's play it.
Where am I?
Will and
watching that
Chelsea,
screen?
you're going to watch the screen up here. The program one, the one that says program. So Will and Chelsea are going to play Angel's Advocate, Devil's Advocate. Me and Gabe are going to play Angel's Advocate. Let's play his clip.
Jesus and the church is going to die again if they don't find a way to portray him the way he was historically known to be. If you look at the history facts of Jesus, which I think favor Christianity in this weird way, that dude is not the dude y'all have turned him into. Y'all have Americanized Jesus and used him as a way of not only propaganda, but you've weaponized God. That was the opposite of who Jesus was. The same people that you were criticizing and going against are the only people that Jesus had a relationship with in the Bible. He did nothing but protect town whores, prostitutes, people in jail. Like the famous story, let he who without sin cast his first stone. He was protecting a prostitute. It's crazy. It's like, man, that's the opposite of what that dude was doing. So that's my problem with the church. It's like, even if we just go by the 4 books that y'all call the only 4 accounts of him, this dude ran around with 12 thugs. If he was here today, he'd be on a Harley.
Okay. We'll blur out the cuss. The cuss part of the
Well, I want to defend his cussing.
Okay.
A little bit. I want to defend his cussing because I think that this even got brought up at Masters. This got brought up actually. We're talking about biblical
Like cussing?
languages because Paul uses the most emphatic negative you could use in Greek,
modern day
right?
day cuss words
in Greek. Yeah, so he cuss, and so Paul says a cuss word as we would think about it, but why? To emphasize a point, and so he's bringing home a point and emphasizing it, because I think there was, when I was in school, I don't know what band it was, but there was a Christian band that had a cuss word in it, and that's what kind of like ignited the whole. Can Christians even do that? Are you allowed to just cuss? Aren't we supposed to be, using our words wisely and be a blessing to others, and make sure we're not offending people, stuff like that? Well, if you're emphasizing a point and you're still showing grace to somebody while trying to emphasize that point. Yeah, I mean, not that it's open season, but if you want to emphasize a point to somebody and still show grace to them, there could be a moment in time where that's what's going to get through to somebody.
Yeah. So if you're on the record, Gabe cusses all the time.
Gabe cusses all
I've known Gabe since he was like 12, and I don't think I've ever
not one cuss word.
I don't even think a G golly has ever come out of his mouth.
Golly, G.
I haven't felt like I needed to emphasize something that much.
Maybe before we fight or we go against each other, I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
Okay.
I rock
What do
with
you
you on
mean
that.
you're with him on that?
Like
cussing is okay.
We might get divided right here.
I know.
I'm asking a question.
This is a free-for-all podcast.
Okay, I heard a podcaster, I'm not going to name his name, y'all will know, who is like known for cussing on his podcast.
You're talking about Tim Ross.
Dang. You're so annoying. Yes. But so he's dropping, you're so annoying. So he's dropping F-bombs, but this is what he says. He says, he dropped F-bombs. The church went crazy on this dude. The next podcast that he drops, he says, I was kind of in my head because all these people were like, he's not a real Christian, he's cussing. And then he's like, I had a dream. And the Holy Spirit told me, the way you speak is going to bring people to me.
Yeah.
The cussing is going to bring people to me. So what do y'all think about that?
Yeah.
That the cussing is the avenue in which people are going to say, I rock with that man.
Well, his argument is I'm just being 100% me on and off camera. But the problem is that he's not doing it to emphatically make points. He's doing it in relevancy of his nature of just his language, which to me is a loose cannon. So if Tim was here, which I'm very famous for keeping it 100 amongst even big name guys.
That would be really cool if we had him on.
So if Tim was here, I would tell him. I know. No, he didn't do it anymore.
Yeah, he decided not to.
After the crowd pressure, came on him and he adjusted, which I think is wise. I don't think whether he did it because he was scared or whatever. I just think he made a wise decision. But I think his argument was, I'm just being me, and that's what's going to win people. But at some point, you have to. There's a certain conduct in living, and there are certain avenues and platforms that you have where things are appropriate and aren't appropriate. And so, in the case of what he's exhibiting in his language, like he's just talking about a coffee cup and using that type of language and using the N-word like you would vicariously in anything. But to me, you 100% limited your reach at that point.
Oh, yeah.
And you've limited people's respect level of you. Now, you may now be marked a common man, but you've also devalued your voice and your own. He's not emphasizing something. He's just saying it about anything and whatever. And that's where I think is a little, that's kind of you're losing wisdom. You shouldn't do it. And I'm glad he course corrected in that way. I hope he stays that way in that way. But yeah, I mean, emphasizing something to draw a point of its grotesqueness or its attributable, like Paul would, which is like the famous one in his Romans where he's saying, all sin is forgiven by God's grace. And then he says, so does that mean we should just go and do whatever we want so grace may abound? In our English Bibles, it says no, capital, but really in Greek, it's a H no, an F no, like that.
Or even in where he said all his good deeds, he counts them as rubbish.
Yeah.
But that's was skubalon in Greek, which is like that's like a really. I mean, my teacher said it was almost equivalent to us saying the S word. Like poop, like just straight degraded poop is what he's trying to emphasize there. But that kind of reminds me of who was that pastor? Mark
Driscoll?
Mark Driscoll, who
he had language too.
He had some insight. I mean, he's kind of off the map as a pastor right now, but
he's back on.
He ain't off the map.
He's back
on, bro.
Driscoll is fully back on.
No, as like a pastor, like his church and stuff.
Yeah.
Leave my
Back on?
teammate alone, Chelsea.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think I'm the same.
bro.
Does he have a podcast?
Yes.
And that's it
Dude, and he's on pray.com. The dude's like the second most listened to guy on pray.com.
Is he still like on that how he kind of got on the map?
Yeah.
He still kind of does that.
He's coming back.
Hey, what's your problem with Mark Driscoll? You rolled your eyes.
I didn't
What's
roll
your
my
beef?
eyes. Roll the tapes. I didn't roll my eyes.
No, what's your beef?
Hold up. Before we go
I don't have
on,
beef. I was just saying he's still on the map.
before we go on like the fifth topic, I want to say this about cussing. Because if you see me and Adam's text thread, I might never come back. No, but my point is, man, even when Jesus looks at the Pharisees and calls them like a brood of vipers, he calls them fools, whitewashed tombs. I don't know if that's profanity. I can't say culturally. I don't know historically if that was actually used in profane context. But that's as close as it gets. That's like,
Right.
Because
strong.
You could still use strong language that's not cussing for us, but you'd be like, dang, that guy's.
And I think when it comes to certain sins, right? And the Bible is clear. We need to bridle our tongue, right? We need to have self-control, be slow to speak, quick to listen. So principally speaking, like our words matter to build up. But in application, I don't know if like a word in itself is sinful, right? It's like intent and the way and the context in which you use it. So for me, like Adam was saying, like in certain spaces, I do use what would be considered like foul language or like a cuss word.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like a professional place or for the if I don't want to stumble people, right? Right. Because there's the Bible calls sin, but there are sometimes the Bible there's no clarity. So he says, use your conscience.
Yeah.
Right. And if it's not your conscience, think about the brother or sister next to you. So I think it's one of those areas.
For sure.
Right. Anyways, back to Mark Driscoll.
Yeah, I knew. No, I'll say this. I knew we have close relationship with all the sheriffs and stuff like that at our church. So I remember one time I was talking to one of the sheriffs who's like a very, very devout Christian. And he was talking about how like cussing makes him feel uncomfortable. Like he doesn't do it at home. It's not in his natural language. And this dude's like in his 50s. So he's been a cop for a very long time. And he said, you know, what's interesting is, you know, when we're out on patrol, you know, if you ever seen police footage, a lot of times you'll hear police say, you know, get on the ground and da-da-da, and you bleep. And you think, man, this cop is being really harsh. And this guy needs to be more polite. And he said, you know, you have to imagine for a lot of these individuals when they're growing up in fatherless homes, they're growing up in the hood, they're growing up where their peers are their mentors. So someone 2 years older than them or whatever, like the way they talk to each other is a cuss word every other sentence. And so politeness, they don't use politeness on a daily level. So when they're out there and they're using vulgarity, their way of rationalizing it is, I'm speaking to them as anyone else would, and that's the only language that they respond to. They don't respond to, sir, please stay back in your car. They respond to, get in your, because they don't. That's how their friend would talk to them. If their friend was coming out, their friend would say, get in the car, in that way. And so I think it's the idea of, for some individuals, what is it that would wake you up? And I know for me, there was a time, someone got upset and emailed because what a lot of people don't realize, like in our church, we're a minority church. So we're majority African American, majority Hispanic, and we have people coming from all sides of the road. So you'll have anyone coming to our church that's anywhere from a doctor to someone that's a dealer comes to our church, and that's very real. And so in a sermon one time, I talked about horniness and actually used the word horny. And a white woman who was visiting got very upset and emailed and went on all these things and like, man, that guy has no tact, and that pastor using disgusting words and disgusting language, he's a pervert for using the word horny and all these things like that. But for me, in that moment, I'm not talking about the white picket fence person. I'm talking to the guy that grew up on the wrong side of the track, who legitimately only, if I said, you're gratifying your earthly pleasures, he doesn't know what that means. He no idea what that means. Or you have a spirit of perversion. The dude, they use that language when they're doing that. They use the language that they're horny. And so there was, so what I said was, what I was talking about in regards to was, there are times where we try to gratify our flesh, and you're not hungry, because some people be like, oh, I did this because I have hunger and my wife's not being there for me and not this. And my point was, you're not hungry, you're just horny. That's who you are. And until you deal with that, it's not that someone's not fulfilling your needs or meeting your needs. It's the fact that in a Christianese, we would say that is a perverted spirit that we could Christianese that all day. But the guy who's sitting in there that I want to grab onto what I'm saying, I need him to hear it the way that he would only receive it. Yep. And I don't think we always understand what maybe even a speaker is trying to do when they're speaking, if they use a strong language, which is why, going back to Driscoll, there is a level of me that understands why he has done his ministry approach the way it is, because he's not talking to the average woman or the average man who gets it. He's talking to the man who didn't have a father. He's talking to the man who, if he did have a father, his dad talked to him very brashly. And so where Mark is trying to get, because that's one thing, I mean, I know he gets a bad rap, but I know that he sits with a lot of guys. He's like around them. He hears them. He listens to them. Like he doesn't sit on an ivory tower where he don't engage with nobody. And he just he engages, he has conversation, he meets with people. And so what he's doing, and I get it, because sometimes I've gotten that way in private counseling where I've had to tell guys, you are a piece of you-know-what because of some stuff they did. And that is the only thing that gets them to have their eyes wide open. Because when I'm just like, brother, we all have feelings. We all have needs and wants. The dude's looking at me
Nobody's getting woken up to that.
that dude's looking at me like, well, whatever, But when I'm like, bro, you're a piece of crap. You do this to your wife and blah, blah, blah. Eyes get all big. And, we use some other words sometimes. His eyes get big and he's like, okay. It's a starting point. It's like, hey, you awake now? Can we have a deeper conversation? I'm not behind in the monk booth, praying 10 times a day. I'm out here with you. What are you going to do about this? And then part of them goes like, oh yeah, okay. So I don't think everyone always understands the importance of using emphatic language. And we just think like, okay, you're Christian. You got to use all the pretty doused up language and become Christianese, learn that Christian language overnight. Right. But I also don't think you should abuse it. And should it be abused, right? So, yeah, I think there's balance.
Yeah, no, even at Masters, one of my teachers, I told you about him a couple times, my sermon prep teacher. And so everybody in that class, potential going into ministry, potential pastors, depending on how he reviews your sermons, you'll want to kill yourself or go all the way, go all the way with it. And so he ends his class. He does this every semester. He ends his class with just an emphasis on, hey, if you're going into ministry, don't go in there with sin. Don't just be sinning it up and then having to deal with it in ministry, blah, 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 blah. And he just kind of goes on. And he kind of ends it with, get your together. And he says it really emphatically, really loud in the classroom at Masters. And so the kid's like, oh, shoot. That's how that word's pronounced, dude. Well, and so they really, for that audience, really woke him up. Okay, no, and that's not on the outside it could seem squeaky clean, but there's a lot of stuff going on with people, regardless of whatever 100%. Biblical background you come from. And so for them, they're walking around with, okay, no, this is important, this is crazy, and sadly some kids are like, I can't believe he said that.
Oh yeah, for
sure. He did that, and it's like he was talking to you then. I don't know.
Well, I think one of the key things that Christians or those who consider themselves followers of Jesus need to discern is the difference between principle and application. And I remember when I was at school, we were reading a book, and it's called Application Heresy, and that's where a lot of actually communicators and preachers make a mistake, right? Yes. They principally teach, the Bible says, let the words that come out your mouth be pleasing to the Lord, right? But then they go into applications, and that's when the disconnect happens. And they say, that means you should say, thank God. That means you shouldn't say, oh man, whatever, right? Yeah. So there's this disconnect of what does the scriptures actually teach about our speech? Yeah. And does the scriptures actually prohibit us from certain words? And from my understanding, it actually doesn't.
Right.
But the Bible does teach about following your conscience when the Bible's not clear. The Bible does teach about if someone is stumbled by your speech that you are okay with because you're a more mature believer, you should probably avoid those things, right? Versus saying, you can't talk that way because that's what the Bible says. It's like, no, does the Bible really say that? That's not really what it says, right? So, and those are the nuances that happens once you really begin to understand the word, right?
Right. Because there'll always be a season, right? Because that's better than thinking about it culturally, right? Because culturally, there's going to be certain words. But if you're always emphasizing how somebody else is going to receive it and who's in the room with you, no matter what time in history you're at, you can always keep that in mind, whether it is or not. So in certain circles, that's not going to trip somebody up, and nobody's going to care about that, and it'll even drive points home better using it that way, as opposed to, no, this person's in the room, I know, so now I'm going to adjust my language, and that's more the idea than these words on the list are the no-goes, period, no matter where you're at, no matter who you're with. And it's like, well, that kind of doesn't even seem like the Bible has a list. It seems like it's more ideal based, like the way you presented it, for sure.
All right, so here's the argument for those that are listening and watching us right now. Just know all opinions and views expressed right now at this point in time does not mean that the individual holds to those. It is for argument.
For an argument. You really do.
It is. Hey, Will's the one who chose this track.
Right.
I was doing one originally that was cohesively all of us at the same time.
You're right.
So for those that know, not everything expressed by me and Gabe is going to be me and Gabe's opinion. Right. It is solely for the sake of the debate and conversation, as is Will's and Chelsie, which, since they are more on the defense of it, it's a little easy for them. We're on the affirmative, so it's harder. So here's the basis of where I will start. To what Jelly Roll said is true. Now, again, sidebar, we know it's Jesus' church. It'll never fade. Yesterday, same today. We read the book of Revelations, all that stuff like that. Hold on.
You don't affirm those things, bro.
No, I don't.
But what did he mean by the church will die?
Exactly. So, argument could be that the American church today will cease to exist. One argument on the proposition, which me and Gabe would affirm, is starting in 2019, for the first time ever, there was more churches that closed than churches that opened. So starting in 2019, 3,000 churches opened, 4,500 closed. As of this year in 2023, it has the highest crisis of more people are leaving full-time ministry than ever before. More churches are closing than ever before. And what it is less people are going into school with Bible majors than ever before, which shows that modern day Christianity in the church that we know it will soon to cease to exist.
Couldn't say it better myself.
Will
said Chelsie.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chelsie. Yeah.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah, you can speak. You can respond.
How does that statistic prove that the church will cease to exist?
Well, it proves that over the course of years, if that continues, at some point, it will flopside it. So right now, there's something like 300,000 churches in America. If you take into account that since 2019, about 5,000 have dropped. If you subsequently, which there's no current data per se of 2020, 2021, but we know through COVID, even banks are saying more churches have closed down more than ever. So let's just on a conservative level say 30,000 churches have closed in the past 3 years. Well, if you have 300,000 churches, and if at some point, if 30,000 continues to multiply and you even get down to 100,000, which could be in 5 years, then you're looking at a third of churches in America are completely closed down at that point, with minuscule amounts reopening, or even people like Will going into full-time ministry and starting their own church, right?
I don't think there's anything wrong with churches shutting down.
Go.
I think some churches should shut down.
Oh.
And
I wasn't ready for that response. I wasn't ready for that one. I wasn't ready for that.
He's agreeing to disagree.
I wasn't ready for that.
I don't think there's anything wrong with some churches that they should shut down. Jesus shut things down too. He shut down Saul's kingdom and he established David's kingdom. And I think perhaps what he's saying should happen. According to what you're saying, as in like,
welcome to the team.
Oh wait, I'm supposed to be on the other side. Why did I just say that?
No. So here's what I'm hearing from you is you're defending it as I'm saying it's a negative thing. I'm saying it. I'm saying that it shows the illegitimacy of Christianity and modern day Christian. Well, because he's still pro Jesus. He's still pro Jesus' message, right? So if I'm affirming his statement, Angel's Advocate, then what I'm saying is if people would just stick to Jesus's model, which is purely loving people, then maybe Christianity would grow.
Yeah. So let me respond two ways. First thing he gets wrong.
Careful.
Yes, Jesus loves all people, and Jesus accepts you as you are, but he doesn't expect you to stay as you are. Right, that's where my brother, I don't know, what was his name?
Jelly Roll.
Jelly Roll. Jelly Roll? It's like, you ain't even trolling me. That's his real name. I was like, I'm about to become a meme right now. Jelly Roll. Jelly Roll. All right, Mr. Jelly Roll over there.
Jelly Roll is misinformed.
He has a false gospel in the sense that, yes, Christ meets the Samaritan woman where she was, but she left as an evangelist, right? So Jesus may accept us in all of our sins. He may love us in our divorce, love us in our drug addiction, love us in our depression, but Christ then begins to transform us, right? Mm-hmm. And if the churches begin to shut down, I know this sounds weird, I think that's totally fine, because it's not about institutions remaining. It's about the bride of Christ remaining as it was supposed to be. And everything I'm saying right now is not even me trying to not be me putting on an act. I actually believe everything I'm saying, by the way. So it's easier for me to say this.
It's easy for you to say, bro. That's why I said I'll give you guys the easy side, and me and Gabe will take the hard side.
But I don't think that's necessarily what he's saying, right? Because I think because you're saying, right, come as you are, but don't stay as you are, essentially kind of deal. But I don't think that's necessarily what he's talking about. He is just talking about that maybe people are rejecting at the front door. Yeah. At the front door, not even letting you come as you are, not even going to the next step of now that we're accepting you, it seems like no, Christians are gonna get out of here with all that, horse stuff or whatever he's talking about, like that stuff, as opposed to, like the example of the woman caught in adultery, he was defending her. Why aren't we on the forefront in American churches? Because I think that's the emphasis too, is American churches, because he's talking about propaganda and stuff like that.
The politics.
Right. So not like the global church, but more on the front end, and less of pervasive through.
Yeah. Well, I think there's what I'm picking up from his language is there's a pendulum switch, right? There's this one side where he's saying the church in America is so judgmental, right, so harsh, so political, whatever he's saying, but he's responding with the church shouldn't speak truth, or shouldn't have distinctions, shouldn't speak up for what the word says. And I think I heard a quote from I think it was Lisa Bibir. She said her generation, talking about boomers, they spoke the truth without love. Therefore, this generation is speaking love without truth, right? Yep. So that's what I feel like he's doing. There's a little bit of truth, right? There's little things in there. That's what y'all doing too right now. But it's and he's like, Jesus' disciples were a bunch of thugs. I'm like, they're fishermen, probably more they're marketplace leaders.
Well, there was a zealot.
There was a zealot.
Stab Romans.
So he should have said.
Peter cut an ear off of a soldier.
He should have said.
And he was a fisherman.
Yeah, and there's a tax collector. So there's a few of them there, right? But there's also Andrew, right, and Philip, who are fishermen. So you could tell he's doing these exaggerated points to make an emphasis without thinking about the nuance of how complex the American church actually is. Right?
So you don't think modern day Jesus would be driving a Harley?
Nah, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
What would he have? The Pope Mobile? Bulletproof glass car?
He'd be walking. He'd be Ubering. He ain't got no money, dog.
Oh, he'd be Ubering.
Mary supported his ministry, dog. He'd be on that lift.
What an interesting idea that he brought
Uber
up.
sends, dude. He'd be waiting on people to send him Ubers.
Yeah, come on, man.
He'd tell the disciples,
Mary.
go find a guy in the corner, and he's gonna pay for our Uber today. Yeah. He's gonna. Okay, well, I got two questions for you then. Okay, 300,000 churches in America. Of those, what percentage of those do you feel like if Jesus existed today in a modern form of his ministry he had 2,000 years ago, how many of those 300,000 churches would accept him as he is? What percentage do you think?
If I'm going to, according to the book of Revelations.
This dude pulled out his semi-PhD, his almost PhD.
No, let's keep it real. I don't even, was there out of all the churches like Laodicea, Ephesus, they all got shut down. Except like, right?
Yeah.
Except like one.
Right.
Which was there was one
like
church
one or two,
that was like celebrated all the way through.
I know
Good
we got
job.
our end times people that
You know
listen
what
to
I'm
us who are
saying?
screaming it at their
But
YouTube
like,
right
hey,
now.
my bad, I'm new
Even
to,
guys with MDivs and PhDs and all that can't remember every
No, like
aspect.
just to answer your question, I heard one of the ways I prepare my sermons is actually I heard John Tyson say this. He says, as a preacher, what he does is he imagines his church is in the book of Revelation,
Oh, yeah, I've heard
and
of
he
this.
thinks, how would Jesus rebuke us?
Yeah.
The way he rebuked one of the 7 churches there, or encourage us.
Yeah.
But there has to. So there's like one church that didn't shut down. That mean I can't do the math, bro.
It's like 1 out of 7.
1 out of
7.
7, dog.
1 out of 7.
So, but would you then agree then that most churches in America, if we're going to use a generalization, which is kind of what he's doing, right? He's kind of generalizing, is doing a horrible job of portraying how Jesus actually should be.
That's assuming that there is no room for growth or that the church won't change. So I think we have a generation who really wants to understand the nature of who God is in a different way. And when you understand the nature of who God is, when you know who he is, things change. So his side is assuming that the church is bad, therefore it will always be bad. Think it's okay for a season for the church to be unhealthy, but we can't assume that one day they won't be healthy again.
Right.
So I think if you look at relationships or marriages, I'm sure that there are years or seasons where it's like, this is unhealthy. Well, he's assuming it's doomed. It's just unhealthy. Like, end it. No.
Well,
Once you learn and have more knowledge, there is now room to grow. And I think there's a generation who wants to have more knowledge of who God is. And when you do have that, I think a healthy church will grow.
Right. I think you agree with him more than you disagree with him. Because I think he started.
Didn't know you wouldn't understand the rules of this.
He started it with the church will die again if they don't start portraying Jesus the way it is.
The way that
so
is.
you're giving it a lot.
Okay.
You're giving it a lot more context.
Second question.
Yeah.
I had 2 questions. I'm trying to find the church. What one of the 7 churches got
Somebody
the thumbs
write
up
it in
from
the comments.
Jesus?
Write it in the comments for us.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it. I don't know if it's Ephesus or what. Okay, second question. If the biblical version of an outcast or reject is someone who is sexually explicit, prostitute, tax collector, which we see Jesus's expressions of extreme love come from him loving the unloved. So that we know for a fact. There's no debate that Jesus expressly shocks the audience time and time again with loves. Though he doesn't love the one that you think he would love, which is the person who goes to church every day, the person who follows the law perfectly, the person who's following all the 10 commandments. That's the rich young ruler. That's the Pharisees. That's the Sadducees. Jesus does not express, he calls them, like you said, brood of vipers, white men's tombs, all those things like that. Whitewashed tombs, white man.
Yeah,
Little Freudian slip right there.
What translation?
Adam's half white, by the way.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
FYI, just so y'all wonder.
Got problems with half of me, right? So okay, so the common thing, which we would say, right? Conceptually, we'd say the average churchgoer, average Christian falls under that category, right? So we're not saying too many. I mean, not that I know of are too many. I know many people in my church, but not too many globally. would say, oh yeah, that Jesus, they exhibit that life of Jesus, right? They maybe more so exhibit the Pharisee and the Sadducee, right? So then he does extreme things. He loves the person caught in adultery. You've already shared, but yes, it's expressly to tell them to go and change and all that stuff like that and repent. The woman at the well, right? These are all people who were outcast. Nobody wanted to get water with her. She had to do it in the afternoon, so no one would be there to call her out. All those things like that. Who would be a modern version of that today?
Of Jesus?
No, of that person,
Oh, the
that
person.
Jesus.
Sorry, I understand.
Those people, because these were different types of people, right? They didn't all fit in one bubble. As you could totally just, one broad stroke. Yeah, well, they were all sinners. Well, so were the Pharisees. So Jesus was loving them differently. So this person that we see that Jesus has expressed extreme love to, who's the modern day version of that outcast, of that reject today in America?
Yeah, my mind goes to 2. With Jesus, the principle is that he's for those who are socially and religiously outcasted, right? And the principle is that he has a bent towards those who are not welcome in the religious sphere, right? And the application of that during that time was this people like tax collectors, people caught in adultery, but also when you read the Gospels about like the Samaritans, right? The Samaritans, there was a racial war, right? There was a tension between half Jews and half Greeks or half Gentiles. But Jesus says that it was a Samaritan that took care of the guy who was homeless, who needed a place to stay, who was beat down. So it's like there's different types of people he's intentionally provoking the church or the religious people to think through. So I think in today's world, the Samaritan was considered an enemy of the Jewish people. So I think of like who is stereotypically, categorically seen as like enemies of the church, which may be application for today could be the LGBTQ plus,
Right.
Yeah.
Right? And Jesus is saying is those people who are showing love right now and you're not, right? That could just be an application point in saying those type of ways. That's the group that first comes to my mind. And it's still the same people. It could be people who are addicted to drugs. It could be the foreigner, the immigrant, the sojourner, the one who has no access to resources. It could be a minority amongst minorities who just doesn't feel like they belong anywhere. So I think it could be all the above, you know. But my immediate thought went to the LGBTQ community,
Right?
Because I feel like that will be the place that's most hostile, both ways, you know, towards the church and maybe the church towards them. And God oftentimes he begins to move in those spaces, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Those are my immediate thoughts, but yeah.
It kind of gives the idea too, because even getting to one of his main things, propaganda, and almost taking political stances, and how more churches than ever are starting to take more of a political lean, and seemingly it's conservative or bust for a lot of churches, and it's like, well, is that the message here? Is that what Jesus is proclaiming? Is, you know, when you're looking at the Bible, seemingly there's more conservative values, and so that's what we have to align with. And so people are leaving churches, especially during like COVID and all those. The people, it was making or breaking it for some churches, where I'm going to leave this because they're not talking about this issue anymore. Or I'm going here because they're talking about this. With liberal churches as well, seemingly, but it's not as I don't know how common that is, as opposed to a church that's openly conservative, as a church that's super openly liberal. And so I think that with the LGBTQ idea, or the people itself, most churches, how welcoming like Jesus would be, right? If we're talking about how Jesus would welcome these enemies or people that should be far off from the church or from religion, most churches in America, how are they going to interact with an LGBTQ member and that community in gender, or the transgender? You know, they're all fitting in that umbrella. So would you agree with that?
I think Jesus would be with them.
Right. But for churches today, though, like, you think churches would align with that?
Align with what?
With what Jesus, with the model that Jesus would be with
that crowd?
Again, I know so many different type of churches, dude. So for me to categorically say the church, like, I know churches who are doing such a great job ministering to the LGBTQ plus community, and they're doing things and it's kind of edgy and cutting. And I know some churches who are like, y'all can't walk in here, y'all can't serve here, y'all can't be members here, y'all need to get straight before you do this. So I guess the way I view it is, I don't think Jesus would be talking that way to people who are experiencing those things. I think he'll start from a different angle, just like the speech and language and how we speak in different contexts. I think when it comes to people who already have a sense of shame, already have a sense of I'm not welcome there, I think Jesus' approach would have been so much more gracious, gentle, loving, kind. And I do know some churches who are doing that. So, you know what I mean? So, but if we're talking about the evangelical industrial complex, or like the mega, right?
Yeah, well, because that's his argument, right? Yeah. His argument is churches suck.
Yeah.
In the most general way.
Yeah.
And so, we would agree with that, right?
Yeah.
We would agree.
We're supposed to be affirmative.
We agree that churches, churches in the American church. We can't speak about China or any of these other places, but
why'd you say China?
You know,
I'm playing.
Smart. Onion. 300,000 churches in America.
Now, dog. He thinks onion is Chinese,
dude.
but it's okay.
When we were really speaking Korean.
Yeah, no.
Will's Korean, by the way.
No, that was an assumption that you had on me on what I meant. Doesn't sound very loving to me.
All these masters people. What were you saying?
Yeah.
What were you saying, Pastor Adam?
So, saying in his lens, right? You're talking to. I don't know what his personal relationship is with Christ, but
he has a cross tattoo under his eye.
Right,
so
under his eye, right? So
looks good.
So in his case, he's looking he's looking at Christianity from the outside. He's definitely not an insider. We could tell he's not because certain language he's using, which anyone who goes to church for a couple months would see that that's not really the case. But for all intents and purposes, the outsider to what church normally looks like. But it supposes he presupposes enough of a broad stroke to say, if even a half of churches in America were operating their ministry like Jesus was, you would not see so many churches close or such a decline of faith in America today. If enough pastors and leaders agreed, and Christians agreed to a certain level of approach of ministry of Jesus, then you would see more people walk in relationship with Jesus than you do today. So therefore, it's not an issue of the church, it's an issue of the people who go to church.
Yeah.
Right.
And where I would disagree with him, or I can disagree if I wanted to, is there also a time that Jesus would preach and people would leave because they're offended, right? He says, you must drink my blood and eat my flesh. And it says the crowds were like, what is this guy talking about? And then they all began to leave. And it almost feels like Jesus was preaching for people to leave until he got to sift who's truly going to follow me. And he looks to Peter and the disciples and says, are y'all going to leave too? And then Peter says, to whom shall I go to? Right? You have the words of eternal life. So there are times, even Christ sent people home. Even Christ said, you got to go bury your dad, go do your thing. I'm rocking with this crew because I'm making disciples here. And yeah, my message is for all people, but in certain contexts, I'm gonna turn the heat up. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna begin to close some doors, or the front door may be huge, but the back door gets smaller, right? So Jesus preached to the 5,000, but thousands of them began to walk away because when he started saying stuff like, you got to pick up the cross. If you want to follow me, you got to die.
So we're looking at one aspect of the church. Like if his stance is churches suck, I'd be curious to see, okay, then remove the churches from America. Remove every single church from America and see if that bettered America. And you would see that we had way more of an effect in the homeless community, in third world countries. So if you really think all churches suck, let's get rid of them and let's see how better society is. That is what I would be curious to see. Because he's not saying...
But they are being rid of.
Not all of them. The unhealthy ones are, but you're not talking about the healthy churches.
So that's where you're trying to clarify. When he's talking about all churches.
Yeah, that's where I disagree.
He's talking about all churches that fit that framework. The question is, here it goes back to the original argument, you're saying there's a far more majority of churches who exhibit the life and ministry of Jesus than don't exhibit the life and ministry of Jesus?
Ask that again.
Okay, so are you saying... Are you following what I said?
Are you following him?
I'm following him.
So are you saying, because whatever you just said right now, right before that, which his argument is, the church is becoming irrelevant. He's not saying it is irrelevant. He's saying it actually does exist. There are people who go to it. There are people who engage with it.
He's trying to be a prophet.
But on the track that it is headed, which is irrelevance to the sinner and irrelevance to actually what's going on. And so instead, majority of churches have chosen to take political platforms, political fights that are really fixing only one type of person and what they're looking for. And then, so you have churches that 90% of their energy is, we're going to speak truth. We're going to speak truth about LGBTQ every Sunday. We're going to speak truth against those liberals, those left-wingers. 90% of our sermons are going to be around that. I just recently heard a sermon from a pastor that preached John 8, the truth will set you free. Mm-hmm. And the whole sermon was, truth is this. God only believes in two genders. God doesn't believe in LGBTQ. That was his whole sermon. And Jesus saying the truth will set you free, his argument was, that's what Jesus is talking about and how it applies today. I think an average MDiv student or potential PhD student could tell you.
He's talking about salvation.
Right.
He is the
that
truth.
John
Truth is a
chapter 8
person.
is
Yes.
not talking about saying something truthful that's in the Bible, right? It's saying the truth of salvation. So by and large, what he's saying is irrevocably, if churches continue to descend down that rabbit hole, you are going to see Christianity in America become irrelevant.
I disagree with that.
How?
He's
Christianity was once relevant in Europe. It's not relevant
it's
in
not
Europe anymore.
anymore.
It was once relevant in Canada. Now you can't even tweet stuff in Canada. Is it irrelevant? It's irrelevant in Canada. What is the fix? I think that's the argument. What is the fix to turn back the tide?
Question. Are we still acting or are we talking in I need clarity right now. I got a lot I want to say, but I'm like, do I need to just make stuff up for the point? Or can we just start talking?
Okay, you want to break it down?
Break it down.
No more debate.
No more debate. Break it down.
No more
All
debate.
right.
Because Chelsea felt the heat on that one.
no.
She's like, break the argument.
I was trying to understand what you were asking, and I didn't, but now I do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Go.
Yeah, I think. And
Now we'll all switch back and forth between devil's advocate and
This is how
angel's
my
advocate.
brain works, and especially like after deconstructing some of the things that I used to think as the faith, now I just deconstructing a lot of my fake faith, right? Everything's so nuanced to me. I mean, there is a truth, but I don't think the church's goal should be to be relevant. I think the church's goal is to be prophetic. And sometimes when you are prophetic, it makes you irrelevant, right? When we are tempted to be relevant, we become an echo. But when we become prophetic, we become a voice, right? And oftentimes a voice does get persecuted. The voice does become, it gets pushed on the side. At the same time, the church is supposed to be evangelistic. The church is supposed to become all things to all people. And I think the question is, when do we become prophetic and stand on the ways of Christ? And when do we put on the lens of a missionary, to the Jew, I become a Jew, to the Gentile, become a Gentile? But the problem, I think, in a lot of American Christians is it's a one-size-fits-all, right? It's like, why are you only talking about truth when it aligns to your political issues? But when it doesn't align to yours, you're like, I don't want to talk about that truth, right? So it's, even as you're even talking politically, I think that's so much of the issues at hand. I feel like people are angry about the church. I heard someone recently say, the church shouldn't lean left or right. It should stand on the truth and call sin, sin, and call righteousness, righteousness. And if you truly stand and not lean, there will be times you're not going to agree with right-leaning policies or conservative values. And there will be times you're not going to agree with left-leaning or what we would call like liberal values. And that's when we become prophetic. That's when we become a voice. That's when the church may not be as relevant, but we restore our authority to be a beacon of light in society in America. And I think too many American pastors, even including myself, we've prostituted the gospel, right? We prostituted God's word for our own ego. We've exchanged the gospel for like a capitalistic sense of bigger, better, faster, instead of like what the truth is. And what Jolly Man, what was his voice?
Jelly roll. Jolly man.
I feel like he is seeing from the outside all the bad stuff. And yeah, I do think most Gen Z and most people who aren't in the church is going to agree with what he's saying.
Yeah.
Right? Which is on us.
Yeah.
Which is on us to clear up some issues. But also at the same time, I'm pastoring a lot of Gen Z and millennials who are also going too extreme.
Yeah.
It's just like, yo, fam, yes, compassion, 1,000,000% empathy, 1,000,000% love, but you need to wrestle with Genesis 1. You can't, you need to wrestle with that, right?
Love without truth.
We need to wrestle with the Romans. And then look at the person of Christ and how we deliver it. So I feel like people are just being lazy. They're just being, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, there would be some questions I would ask Jelly Roll following up. Number one is, I'd say those individuals you're talking about, that prostitute and all those type of individuals, what did their life look like after they met Jesus? Did it stay the same? Did they change? What changed about them? He would say, I don't know. That's where I would say, you should read your Bible, before you make a statement. I would never make a statement on Muhammad without reading the Quran. I wouldn't just be like, this is what Muhammad, and you'll see a lot about that. You'll see, which is another issue in America, is we feel like we're experts on everything. So Jelly Roll feels like he's an expert on Christianity because he's met a few Christians, rather than, and maybe he would shock me and say, oh yeah, I read the whole thing. I don't get the perception he has. And so, so in that case, I would be like, have you read those whole texts? Have you read that book? Have you read the Gospels? And that's what I want to know first is, this person that you're saying is he like, have you engaged with him? Do you know anything about him? Secondly, do you personally believe that he is the way to salvation? Because that's the only thing Jesus cares about. That's what his whole ministry was. So you may think it was about love and acceptance, but can we agree that it's about salvation? And so I think a Gen Z is going to be open to wrestle that unless they just don't want to talk about it. But if they're starting to call, salvation, I don't know. Well, what is that? It's looking for open doors rather than getting caught in the, what a lot of us would do is we get caught in the fact that he just talked about the prostitute or the LGBTQ person. And all I want to do is prove that I'm right, that Jesus is against all these genders, that and that's the truth. That's what we want to get caught up in the fight. And so you always, to me, have to come in on an angle in the discussion that de-weaponizes a person and what they feel like Jesus is about. So that'd be, an additional thing that I would go to see. I think the other aspect is, going to your point, what you just said, Will, like historically we would most of us who you would call mainstream Christians would be known as Protestant evangelicals. An evangelical used to be a very proud statement that you'd hold on to. You're like, man, I'm an evangelical Christian, which means I believe in evangelism. I believe in sharing the message of Jesus. I believe in winning people to Christ. And unfortunately, the evangelical church has become a church that basically just says, yeah, we're modern in our approach. We got lights and we got cool screens and we dress cool and we look cool and we do cool stuff. And then you come to our church and we got cool systems. We do all these systems that'll get you in and out, rather than the evangelical of the past was, how do I love people, love the unloved? How do I win people to Christ? What do people need to be? You think of the Billy Graham, right? Like, you go listen to those Billy Graham sermons, that famous one where he's like, let me talk to you black people now. This is not a white gospel. This is every man's God. I mean, the dude, that's evangelism, right? That he opened up the door. He broke the cultural climate, which you got people coming into these stadiums who are prejudiced, who are racist. Not all of them, but many who are racist. You have people of color who are sitting there and saying, man, this white man's got some cool stuff to say, but man, this white Jesus that they have on TV and at these churches, they don't let us go into churches. And one of my good friends pastors a church called the African American Methodist Church of Zion. And I asked him, I was like, bro, that name is long and confusing. Like, why are you in that movement? Why don't you ever leave it? Or would you ever leave it? Because it's people aren't doing denominations anymore. And he said, you know what? When our founders, over 100 years ago, when our founders got saved who were black, they wanted to join the Methodist Church, and the white Methodists wouldn't let them. So they had to start the African American Methodist Church. Because the white Methodist, which there wasn't no white Methodist, it was just Methodist. They wouldn't let them join. They wouldn't let them go to their schools. They wouldn't let them plant churches. They wouldn't let them anything. So they had to learn from afar. They had to plant their own denomination. And he goes, why would I ever leave something that, our people fought so hard for to be included? Where today we would think that denomination is actually an exclusive church. Where really how it started was an act of an evangelism of the heart for the African American community, but having no denomination or family that would welcome them. So you look at that start and you go like, what are we doing today that exhibits that heart, that expresses our arms? And the front end of his argument being that, where is that evangelism? Where is our heart of evangelism? And there are great churches that are doing, feeding programs and community groups that help people wrestle through. Like there's tons of churches. You guys are one, we're one, all of our friends' churches, but in terms of Cottonwood and others, like we can name a lot in our circle. Yeah. But if we just back up for a second and look at the churches as a whole, you think to yourself, where are we evangelizing the gospel to truly win people to Christ? Yeah. That does the first step. Truly, that first step of the woman who's on the floor caught in adultery, where Jesus writes words and he scares off those that are going to throw, and then he embraces her, tells her how much she is loved, and then says, go and don't sin again, right? Yeah. Yeah. Or the woman at the well that's like, Jesus, let me follow you. And he's like, no, you got to go back to your city. You got to tell everybody what's been done right here, right? But it instituted by first this initiation that says you need something, and Jesus has a place to fulfill that. I don't get the feeling right now that a lot of churches are embracing the fact that people need something. I think they're embracing the fact that people need to get over themselves and accept God for who he is. That's a lot of the feeling I'm getting from a lot of people. Like if you want to rock with God, then you got to give up your party affiliation. You got to but you got to now affiliate over here. And then you actually first, before you can even rock with God, like we need to, I remember one time someone told a neighbor, they were talking out loud. It happened to be a master's student, unfortunately. But they were saying how their neighbors saw that how they were living, and they said, hey, I want to go to church with you on a Sunday. And I see how much you love God and blah, blah, blah. And this person wasn't a believer. And then the person gave them a book by John MacArthur, the Lordship Salvation book. And they said, until you're done reading this, you're not going to come to church with me. When you read this and you tell me you can affirm this book that Jesus is Lord, then you can't go to church with me till you do that.
That is what bothers me about.
And he said this proudly, I got this person on the right track, type of thing. And my mouth was like,
that bothers me about the American church, to be honest with you. Like, I have a lot of frustration with the American church. I really do. And because it's either side, and it's two extremes. It's that extreme. Like, get your life right, then you can rock with us. And there's the other side where it's like, oh, you don't have to get your life right. We love you regardless. So, which is the more Gen Z route. And there's not a lot of a group of people that has that both, truth and love. And that bothers me, because just going to tell people how they need to get their life right and not explaining how it's going to better them, or why Jesus is better than the life that they chose, is just like, I wouldn't want to follow this Jesus if you're just coming to give me a whole bunch of rules or tell me to read a book. Like, I don't want to. What if Jesus first came to the Samaritan woman, was like, man, you got you sleeping with a lot of people right now, and it's not even your husband. What's going on with that? She would have walked away. But he sat with her. He asked her questions. He went to the well at noon, which nobody would have. He did something that nobody would have, and engaged in conversation, and that opened the door for her to hear some truth, which then she became an evangelist. We just have it twisted, and we think that people are going to join the American church because of the truth that we give, but they hate the people that we are. It's just so twisted. I grew up an athlete, like played basketball at Biola, so like the athletes, even at the Christian schools, are like the worst of the bunch. So I was always around like the people who were just at I was at the Christian schools. I was with the people who weren't Christians, who were just there to, because there is money there.
And scholarship.
You were a missionary in Bio.
I really was. No, I really was. And so I was always around my friends who just didn't want nothing to do with God. And I never like shoved Jesus down their throat. I just lived life. There's a lot of my athletes who I didn't even mention the name of Jesus. We just did life together. Just last week, I get a phone call from, and I said this in the last podcast, of one of my athletes who used to bully me, who now wants to follow Christ and wants me to disciple her. And it's not because I was at Biola teaching her the Bible. It's because I was at Biola loving her, regardless of her lifestyle, just walking with her. So if we had but now that I have that relationship, I'm gonna be like, you need to get your life together, dog. Like. Yeah. So I have enough relationship to then speak life. If we are willing to disciple and speak life into people and to get to know them, you can't shove the rules down their throat. Yeah. They're not going to accept it. And that frustrates me about the American church. And we wonder why we're not growing.
So much. Because I'm a church planter, right? So, and I'm a senior pastor. I think about this stuff all the time. So even as we're talking, I'm like, man, what approach do I want to say? But as you were sharing, Chelsie, it's like, I was talking to a friend recently, and it's like, some people do compassion well, but like conviction wrong. Or some people do conviction wrong, but compassion well. But we were talking about, in a time of confusion, there needs to be compassion, conviction, and clarity. And I feel like different churches do different things better than the others, or they just completely neglect the other one.
Yes.
Is this your thing with Grant?
Yeah, we were talking about this. Me and Grant.
They shared about it at the retreat.
Oh, did they?
Him and JP.
Okay,
yeah.
So we were talking about that together. Grant and I were like, because oftentimes you just kind of bend one direction, and I feel like Jesus did all three so well. I remember hearing this a long time ago. The Pharisees lived in like domination. Right, they just try to dominate culture, like me against you. The Essenes live in isolation, right? They just completely disassociated, went into the desert. They're on their own. They say the Sadducees, it was like they were like liberation. They were just liberal. Everything was liberal. But then the apostles was incarnation, right? They went amongst the people, but they knew the culture, but they spoke the kingdom into it. So I think as a lead pastor, I'm always thinking, when do I need to show the compassion? When do I need to stand for conviction? And when do I need to bring clarity to people that I'm pastoring and shepherding, both on the pulpit and like behind the scenes?
For sure. And you said something that was huge. Like the American church, we think we have it all figured out and we know it all. And I think if we approached it with like, hey, maybe of those three areas, where am I kind of lacking? So if we could sit back and say, maybe I don't have, why isn't the church growing? Why wouldn't people want to join the church? Why wouldn't they want to be, and evaluate, maybe there's an area that I've completely neglected. Maybe there's an area that I don't really emphasize. Maybe I could do better in this. And I think if we have a posture of, we can do better, then people are more accepting of a church that recognizes we're flawed, but we want to get better, rather than a church that thinks that we're perfect and needs perfect people to join it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
I think Brother Jelly,
my brother Jelly,
brother Jelly is maybe just Jelly. Right. Kind of waking. Church people are watching that clip. The church lacks compassion in reaching people.
Yeah.
And that was a good point, Pastor Adam, too, when talking about. Has he read the whole book? Because he emphasizes the 4 books, which I'm assuming he's talking about the Gospels, obviously about Jesus' life and stuff. But
read that whole thing.
If you read, but even I think the Gospels could even show enough, and Will got into it as well, which was Jesus was compassionate, but a lot of people ended up leaving when he was preaching, and so that's a whole other aspect. That Paul gets into a lot, right? Paul's talking a lot about sin in the church and all that kind of stuff, and so there is that aspect of what Chelsea's even saying, like, hey, we should be, we should encompass all this stuff, and maybe he's just really, in probably most culture as well, is just like the church is just lacking initial compassion, essentially. But you have to have an understanding too, Jelly, like. We're not just compassionate.
Jelly?
Call him Jello, dog.
Call him Jello.
Well, what often get you in trouble, and I think this is where we get in trouble the most is, and I think it goes to Will's point about clarity, is we get in trouble, everybody, Christian, not Christian, is we make assumptions about what the other person thinks and how they think, right? Only Jesus showed us this prophetic tendency that he had with like, the woman at the well, she's getting water, and he's like, I got living water, right? Only someone filled with the Spirit can lead a conversation in that direction. Any one of us else, we'd be like, even if you knew that she was for the streets,
a little timid.
You would walk up,
100%.
You'd walk up, and maybe you'd be like, maybe you've been giving yourself to other men to find hope, and then right away, so wall up, like blah blah blah, like like there's this nature that he's like, okay, there's a reality of where she's living in. I'll speak some truth to that, but there is this thirst that she has because she's coming here all the time by herself. So I'm going to talk to her about living water. It's this approach rather than the assumption, because she only knows about what she's going through. She knows about that more than you do, for all intents and purposes. Now it's Jesus. He knew everything, right? Let's talk about our case, right? So it's very dangerous to get caught up in discussion where you make an assumption of what that person holistically is thinking or going through, and all you're trying to do is give a fix for conversion on what that is. Because, you know, like I've spent my degree emphasis was in apologetics, so I spent a lot of time. I've debated a lot of Muslims and a lot of Mormons. Like I get excited about that. I get excited about debating Mormons, but.
Right.
One of the things you want to do, and we kind of talked about this at our Beyond the Letter night last night, like if you're debating a Mormon, don't ever make statements about Joseph Smith or about what they believe, because they know it better than you. So if you say, isn't it true that you guys believe X, Y, and Z? Even if it's true, they know more about it than you do, that they can walk through and tell you how what you just explained was wrong about what they believe. So instead, what I'm trying to do is I want to find mutual ground, which is what I know a lot about is the Bible. They believe in the Bible. So let's talk about the Bible. Let's make an agreement that we're not going to look at the life of Joseph Smith or that New Testament that you guys have. Let's just talk about the scriptures in general, which talk about salvation. Let's begin to find a mutual ground where I don't have to make assumptions about what you believe. We could just talk about what you're searching for. So as a Mormon, you're searching for salvation. As a Christian, I'm searching for salvation. Let's first talk about that rather than me thinking that I have to dissemble and dismember Joseph Smith in order to gain their respect in the conversation. Same thing with a Muslim. If I was debating a Muslim, I would never tell them why Muhammad did what he did. Like, they will know that better than I do. But what I could talk about is paradise, which we both believe. We can talk about Jesus, which we both believe in, and I could begin to kind of deconstruct what it is that they're trying to hope on. And I think that's one of the issues we have in the clarity aspect is even sometimes in our preaching is we're thinking, I know what these people need. And no, those people know what they need more than you. And unless you become clear, all you're doing is either preaching from conviction, which either will do one of two things. It'll either, if you just preach from conviction, which conviction is, I'm a one-woman man. I would never lay a finger on my wife. I'm going to love her till the day I die. I'm going to raise my kids. So that's a sign of conviction, right? People either look at that and go like, oh man, this guy's full of himself, walk away. Or people go, oh, that guy, elevate me. And then they elevate you like, oh, that guy's amazing. Look at his convictions. He's so incredible, right? Without the clarity, which is, and sometimes me and my wife go at it, and sometimes I don't want to see her some days. Sometimes you don't want to see, oh, now there's some clarity. Like that guy isn't all, which the Pharisees missed out on. They would give no, it was just, you looked at them and they fasted on Fridays. They gave publicly to the poor. They just, everything on the outside. These guys are guys of conviction, right? And then you have the compassion, which is this side that just goes, man, Jesus is about everybody. We're all made in the image of God. We're all perfect. We're all imperfect. And then you start talking to someone and they go, well, yeah, I believe God has certain standards of living, but I don't think I ever have to share that. I think that's God's job. And then it's like, well, that's not very clear. That's a little true. It's one thing if you just fully believe that God accepts all and but the average spiritual leader, they don't fully believe that God really accepts all and lets anything go and all that stuff, like or else then there'd be no necessity for Jesus, or they believe in Jesus's death was atoned for everyone regardless of whether you accept it or not, right? You're universalist, which there are very few of those in the world today. So I think that clarity part is so important because you should pursue clarity on where a person's at and where you're at and where you're coming from, or else conviction and compassion can be misconstrued as either A, manipulation,
100%,
or B, you can be pedestaled, which I think that's why we get in trouble in the church, because we pedestal these Christian leaders so high because they lead with such conviction, and you think, man, that guy has it figured out. And then we just elevate them without them sharing the clarity of like, man, I'm just a piece of junk too. I need this too. I need, I'm not far off from that day I met Jesus. Like there are a lot of Christians who are so far off from that day that they were lost that they forgot how hard of a decision that was conceptually that said that first step into Christ. Like they lose sight of that. And then they just think you should just snap a finger and leave that life. Well,
or they want to be in their bubble, even that master's person, unfortunately, they just want to be in their bubble of only Christians should be at church. this should just be a place for believers, and look at the New Testament, look at how well, we have mega churches now. We have the mega churches and churches in general now to the public are seen as this could be an entry point to God. I could come here and have an encounter with God, which is what I want. And thank God Christianity's multiplied and has gotten so much bigger and all that kind of stuff. And so it's a matter of, could you just, have church with believers and having unbelievers come and just trust the process. Trust that we're being consistent. Trust that we have a constant message that will convict them of their sin eventually. We're going to be compassionate at first. And as you're here, we're going to be consistent in our message. And, you even shared the story of, an LGBTQ person that was at the church. And, they came here for months and then eventually they got convicted, but they felt so welcome. They felt so whatever. And so we trusted the process, and unfortunately they ended up going another way. But, we should just be able to trust our message. But that's
because there was, like we shared, like there was in all of that, it was a great point Will's making, which is like, in this girl's particular case, who was in the lifestyle, she had a girlfriend for 4 years. They were living together, had an apartment, had cat together, all these things like that. So as she was coming to church, as we were preaching truth, which the truth is salvation, as we were preaching salvation, which is to repent of our sins, to pursue God. And every single week, we don't name everyone's sin. So some people are like, yeah, you got to call out that thing. And it's like, well, I don't call out everyone's sin. I don't have a list that I start service with saying this is what sin is. Sin is missing the mark of God. And so as you miss the mark of God and you realign with the Lord by making Christ Lord, then the Holy Spirit will start to navigate with you what it is that needs to strip away. And yes, in our preaching of truth, some of it would come with us being black and white. There's other times because that person is so asphyxiated with what it is that they're dealing with, like that's something only God can do, and that's something only they can do. But like in the case of what we're talking about, is this girl said she was honest where her lifestyle was at. My wife was honest in telling her, I love you, and this is what I believe God's plan is for your life. It's outside of your this lifestyle. But let's continue to do lunch as you're searching God. Love you. Let's go to service. No one in our church will look down on you or anything. And she was like, okay. And 5 months in, she emphatically told me, God's told me I need to leave this lifestyle and I need to leave my girlfriend. I never, in 5 months of me preaching every Sunday, I never talked about that lifestyle. I never gave any biblical bashing on it or anything, like just preaching truth, which Christ is salvation, Holy Spirit, listen to the Holy Spirit, all those things. And she said, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to leave the lifestyle. I'm not ready to leave my girlfriend. So this will be my last day. And I prayed for her. And even to this day, I still pray for her. But how did we get where we were at? Because there was compassion on her, which was as she was searching for God, we created a welcome space and atmosphere for her to wrestle these things. And we had a small group, just like this podcast. To me, I believe this podcast is a small group with tens of thousands of people, right? Where we can come together and anyone can shoot in how they're feeling, what they're wrestling with. So she would come to the small group and she would bash Christianity. She would bash the church. She had pains growing up of religious people she met, and we would own it. Yeah, you're right. That's wrong. You're right. Well, here, I'll push back a little bit on that. No, that's not who Jesus is. Jesus is like, we bring clarity, right? So you have compassion, which has come in, clarity, and then through the word, now we're preaching conviction. And through conviction, it's my own testimony. Man, when I met the Lord, I was a womanizer, and I had all these women, and God told me, man, I got to drop this. So another person's going, oh, wow, that guy had to give up things too. He wasn't born with an ivory golden spoon in his mouth where this thing called faith was easy for him, right? And so when you have all three with clarity, compassion, and conviction working simultaneously, then a person can be met with the true decision they have to make.
Exactly.
And see Jesus for who he really is. And like you said, in that case with her, she decided, like the rich young ruler, I'm not prepared to give up the things that I know I need to give up to make him Lord. But she at least approached it in a way that didn't feel outcasted, felt accepted, and then felt this is what's part of the process of making Jesus Lord. And I'm not ready for that.
Right. And even in that, like, in that case, and I think it's good to clarify too, like, well, for somebody just watching on the outside, it maybe comes from that more like, I want to be in a bubble camp. Or what do you mean you described it as being welcoming, as being open and stuff? And it's not like, we're not sitting here saying like we're very pro. We have like rainbow flags and that's how we're being welcoming and that's how we're being compassionate. But there's a difference between doing that and being welcoming and just not dogging on somebody.
Well, we don't
for where
treat them like
from.
they're someone else.
Right,
we don't go on a
right.
pulpit and we don't say, listen, with all this garbage going on in our world, with all this gender, that's now immediately you've drawn a line in the sand, right? That's the opposite of welcoming, because you're acting like anyone who's wrestling with that or anyone that's in that is outside of this place, not in this building. And that's immediately, whereas like for us, we get DM'd all the time. People DM our Google page for our church and say, are you an LGBTQ affirming church? And we have, I personally have it, a set, honest response that says, in the traditional sense, no, we are not an LGBTQ affirming church. But we are a church that allows anyone and everyone to come into our church,
Right.
to receive the word of God, to listen, to engage in our community. Yep. But for clarity's sake, our church does believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. Our church does believe in the traditional biblical definition of what marriage and relationship is. But we also believe that addiction is something that is a sin. We also believe that drunkenness is a sin according to God's word. We also believe that adultery is a sin according to the word of God. And so as a church, we do not play partisan towards any particular lifestyle. We encourage all to pursue Jesus and pursue righteousness. And so if that's a church that you'd like to come and visit, I'm 100% clear on the front end, because I've seen too many churches play the okey doke, which is like, are we affirming? Well, that's a good question. Right. We would love to connect you with someone on our team. And then you have this expert person on our team that's like, let me first invite them to a small group, and then I'll just start. And then eventually we'll throw the bait and switch in. That 6 months into it, after they love this place, then you say, well, we're traditional church. See ya, you know. For sure. Or you do the opposite if that's your church's affiliation, and you accept it all, and hoping you just give enough time where they choose a different lifestyle or whatever, right? Yeah. But I do the same. Like, guy sits with me and says, hey, one time I was in youth, I was interviewing a guy to join our youth team as a volunteer, and in it we say, hey, do you have any addictions, things you're struggling with? And he said, yes. He told me when we sat down, yes, I actively do cocaine. It helps in my life. And then he looked at me, he's like, can I still serve in youth? And my answer was, not at this time. But
Yeah.
Someone could be like, wow, that's so unloving. That's so welcoming. Right. Or someone goes, well, it's cocaine. That's different. It's like, no, when it comes to conviction has to be led appropriately with grace should repentance come. And I asked him, is this something you think you want to get help for? You want to move towards a healthier place? He's like, I don't know, maybe. And I'm like, well, why don't you and I walk with that before we work with the youth students? Yeah. And he and I began to work on some things, right? Yeah.
But everything we're saying is like, that's why I think it's such a unique time to be like a leader in the church space, because at least a few decades ago, a lot of the cultural values and the Christian values aligned.
Exactly the same.
So you actually didn't really need clarity, right? When it comes to certain conversations, outside of some racial issues, we all knew there was a difference there,
For
right?
sure.
But some of the social issues of our time are now departing from culture. Right. And as a result, there's a lot of fear of like, am I going to get canceled? There's a lot of fear. Am I going to be labeled that person that is not compassionate? Right. Yeah. And so for me, to be honest, circling back as you guys were all talking, one of the reasons why I went off social media in 2020, I just couldn't handle the emotional mental health that came with me seeing everyone fighting, my church people fighting, like friends fighting, family members fighting. And it's weird. I feel weak saying this, but like my heart was broken. I was like, this is who we are.
Yeah.
Like I was like wow.
Right. and that was the only place they could fight during that time was on social media.
Yeah. And then Jesus says the world.
Well,
will
I
know.
knew people that knew each other 15 years, served with each other, done with each other.
Yeah.
Off of that stuff.
And Jesus makes it clear, like one of the ways, if not the only way, at least the way he says it in the Gospel of John, is that the world's going to know you're my disciples. Is by your love for one another. It's not even your love for the world. Yep. It's the brotherly, sisterly, filial love amongst the church. And when I saw that, my heart was like broken. And then I also didn't have clarity no more either. Because like everybody was telling me what I had to believe. Everybody was telling me what is right and what is wrong. And I had to spend a few years.
If you're a real pastor, you'll do this, or you'll do this, or you'll do that.
Yeah, so I was like, and I even remember, Adam, the first time I met you, I don't know if I even told you this, I probably had the conversation we had about, abundant living hitting the streets during BLM and during the riots. And that's one issue that, quote unquote, leans more left. But then you had another conversation at another organization where you didn't agree with something that leaned another way. And I remember I was like...
And we were the first church in California to open, which is...
that's what it was.
Which is a really right thing. Yeah. That's a really conservative thing.
And I remember I was like, this is my guy. I remember I was like, we're about same age. I don't really meet guys my age who are like senior leaders. And I was like, man, he stood in the face of right-wing people saying like, nah, like we're walking the streets with our people. Mm-hmm. And then he says in the face of the left, like, we're going to worship. And that's when I was like, so it actually gave me courage back, like, all right, well, like, get back in the game, like, get the clarity, get back your conviction, get back your compassion, you take a break. So, you know what I mean? So,
and I remember when we talked about it, it was like, as you were like, we were talking to each other, and like, what led you guys to make those decisions? Mm-hmm. Like, what did you weigh? What did you not weigh? And ultimately, I said, well, we just lead by our convictions. Yeah. That's what it is. Because then if I lead by my convictions, I may come off as left at times. I may come at right times, but I'm not playing that game. I don't evaluate on who will lead my church and who won't lead my church.
And the Bible is not left or right. It's what you're saying.
What givers would I use, and what what people giving would I lose? And I'm not going to make that decision. It's like, no, if this is convictions led and it's the right thing to do biblically, then that's what we're going to do. Yeah. And we're going to take the repercussions on either side, regardless of the circumstance. And I think for the next generation, that's what's important. It's regardless of win or lose, because there are some pastors right now who are on purpose preaching conservative from the pulpit because they see that, especially in California, it grows their church really fast. Others are leading by conviction, which that's cool. You have the Jack Hibbs. Pastor Jack Hibbs has always been like that. So like I truly believe God has called Jack Hibbs to what he's doing and stuff like that. But then you have others that are like, oh man, when you preach on conservative values, politically, you could grow your church really fast. I'm going to start doing that, and then that's where that's like, now you're getting into trouble because you're trying to reach a group, based off of not conviction per se, but based off of, I want to grow, and so therefore
that's another
C.
That's based on compromise.
Exactly.
A preacher's disease right there. Exactly. So with another C, dog.
But there are some who are literally, it's like, that's my conviction. I'm like, rock on, do that. Then if you feel like the Lord has called you prophetically to do whatever you need to do in that area, you do that. I mean, I believe the Lord has prophetically called us to do what we do specifically, which is like this podcast is one of those things where people don't wrap their head like, why do you do that every week? To me, it's a prophetic mandate from God to speak to culture in a gracious, loving way, while also expressing our conviction very clear on the table, right? So I think every leader has to decide for them, like, this is what the Lord has called us conviction-wise to do in our church and in our community that will ultimately not win people to Christ, but also disciple people to Christ, rather than we're doing it just to stick it to them, just to stick it to that other side. That's dangerous now. Now you've just been like every other Pharisee and just excluded people outside of the room. If it's about, we just want to over clarify who belongs in our church and who doesn't. We're glad those individuals that were teetering got out of here. It's like, well, that's compassionless.
Oh, for sure.
All right, everybody, we hit that time. It's 2 hours on it. Thanks you, everybody. God bless you. Will, my dog. Thanks for joining us.
Good being back.
Will might join us from time to time, so we'll see. We're having great conversations. Potential PhD student.
It was a demon.
Oh, you were getting your demon.
Your PhD. I'm just saying PhD.